Hey guys, Sarah Partee. I'm doing my ARP presentation, and mine was on motivation in the gifted classroom, specifically math classroom. Little introduction about me. I'm a high school teacher. I've been teaching math in a Gwinnett County public school for this is my third year. I teach mixed classes, meaning I teach classes that are both gifted and college prep. So I have everybody in my classrooms, and I teach Algebra 2 and pre-calculus. Now, my class for pre-cal is an accelerated pre-cal, so I have more gifted students than non-gifted students as far as labels. However, all of those students are somehow kind of accelerated. But I also am around gifted students as a swim coach. We tend to have many high-level students that come in and swim for us. So I'm around them in both the educational setting and athletic settings. The problem that I was working on when I was coming up with my topic was that I see a lot of gifted students now, and it partially is because I am a mixed class. I'm not necessarily an AP or a gifted labeled course, but I see a lot of gifted students who just it's a matter of complacency. They're passing. It's not that we've got these kids who are failing, but they're just not interested in really going the extra mile. They can pull an A, and that's fine. They can do it without trying, but they're not really interested in understanding the material. They're really interested in, do I have an A? Yeah, okay, I'm done. So I would see students zoning out. They would sleep. They would talk to others. They would draw. They would read. They'd distract themselves with their phones or iPods or anything like that. They just were not motivated to stay mentally present in the class. And it really just, it irritated me because gifted students are capable of so much and so deep of an understanding of material. And I wanted to know why they weren't finding motivation in class. Why are you fine with just kind of skating by and doing a really shallow understanding of things? So my action research question is, can a teacher's participation in gifted motivational techniques professional development increase motivation in the classroom as shown by summative assessments and student surveys? Kind of wordy. Basically, there was a professional development that was going to be happening at my school about gifted students' motivational techniques, and I was interested in how they would specifically come into a math classroom. And I looked at summative assessments and student surveys in order to actually find how they were working for my classes. This is a little bit wordy, so just kind of a overall view. The process. I first took measures for summative assessments and the student kind of self-evaluation survey. My summative assessments, I used a mid-unit quiz as well as a unit quiz from the unit before I began doing these motivational techniques. Even though it's a different topic, it's still, I'm looking at the change overall. So it should still show a change if motivational techniques are actually working. Some of the motivational techniques that I brought in from that professional development are pairing gifted students in an ability to answer a higher level question or debate something in according to what I was doing at the time. We were covering statistics at this time for this unit, and so we talked a good bit about bias, and so I would kind of pair my gifted students and allow them to debate bias and discuss how to alter an experiment or a survey in order to try to reduce bias, things like this. Or I would allow my gifted students, another one would be to establish mini teachers. So these students knew that when they were done with their work or their notes, they had to go teach somebody else. And for a lot of our students now, especially in high school, it's very important what others think of them. And especially gifted students, they want to be seen as smart. They want to be seen as high-level thinking. And so for them to go to another student and teach something if they didn't actually understand it and weren't able to answer that student's questions, that would look bad on them. And so it kind of encouraged them because the consequence was looking bad to your peers. And none of them really want that. After I went to the professional development, I took some of these motivational techniques and I added them into pre-made lesson plans that I already had for the unit. and just worked. I had at least one motivational technique in each class every day, and I would switch back and forth sometimes. Sometimes we'd do a couple, one after another. Sometimes I would repeat, but I had at least one of these motivational techniques that I learned in each one of my classes. I did that for about 4.5 weeks, and I'm on an alternating block schedule, so that means that I saw my students about 10 to 12 times in that 4.5 weeks. Once the 4.5 weeks were done, once the unit was done, I pulled the mid-unit quiz and the unit test scores again, and then I allowed students to take a post-survey that was the exact same thing that they took before the unit. Now they're taking it again after the unit, after these professional development techniques had been implemented, and I did averages of everything. My relevant research really centered around motivation and its place in the classroom and its influence on student ability and student understanding. I had a couple different sources. Many of the sources I found really said the same thing, which is why I don't have a whole lot of them. But it really honest is exactly what you would think. And the biggest one that kind of didn't throw me, but it's not something I really ever thought about, was this third one. And it discusses the fact that students need to feel competent in this material before they can be motivated to continue going with it. And it really reminded me of the hierarchy of needs, and that the students have to feel safe. And their idea of safe is that they have to feel competent with the material themselves before they can really they can go that extra mile, and they can show that motivation. So it really told me that my lesson plans for these, aside from the motivational techniques, my lesson plans needed to be very thorough and very specific, and I needed to make sure that I was doing my job as a teacher to relay this information in the best way possible for my students to understand before I could really start pushing motivational techniques and asking them to go the extra mile. I followed Sager's method for action research in its 4 steps: so clarifying vision and targets, articulating theory, implementing action and collecting data, and reflecting on data and planning informed action. So my vision and targets, I narrowed down my idea. I initially wanted to study motivation, and I knew that, but I narrowed it down to the motivational techniques and how they worked for gifted students, specifically in the math classroom, because obviously I teach math, so I'm concerned with how it affects math. And then the motivational techniques specific, because it was something that was going to be easy to implement. I wasn't going to be looking at something that was very abstract. These are very concrete. The professional development told me pretty much exactly what to do. Now I had to think about how to implement them, but it told me exactly what to do. So articulating theory, I had to actually figure out what I was going to do. What was I going to look at? So I decided that I was going to look at test and quiz scores, because most of us believe that higher test scores, that's higher intellect and it's higher motivation to learn material. But I wanted to also kind of take into account what the students thought and how they were feeling about things. So I added in this student self-evaluation survey in order for them to tell me, my test score might look higher, but I really don't, it maybe is just one little thing. So I included the survey in my SDC presentation, but basically it was asking them, do you find it easy to pay attention in class? Do you find that you are interested in learning more about the content and going deeper? Do you find that you are interested in using this content in your daily life somewhere? Things like that. Then I went to implement action and collect data. I actually performed these motivational techniques in my lesson plan. I pulled the data from my mid-unit quizzes and unit test, and I gave my post-survey after the unit, as well as the pre-survey before I began these lesson plans. Then into the last one, actually reflecting on the data and seeing what happened. When I reflected on my data, and you'll see it in the next slide, or you saw it in the SDC, every measure, test scores, mid-unit quizzes, and the student surveys, they all increased through this. And I didn't tell my students what I was doing. I tried my best to kind of not keep it on the down low, but I really didn't want my students saying that they thought their motivation was higher because they knew I was looking at motivation. That wasn't what I wanted. I wanted them to just tell me honestly, do you feel that you are better motivated in class? Are you feeling like you want to do better after this unit? And I wanted to see what they said. And the action that we were going to take with these, and the action that we have taken with these since, I am the content lead for pre-calculus. And so I wanted to tell my other pre-cal teachers on my team, like, look, these are working and we need to implement them, and we need to implement them now. We're only about 5 weeks out. We were probably about 6 or 7 weeks out at this point that I was done with this. And there's no time like now. If we can start working on these now, our next year kids for pre-cal, we'll have these down, we'll know what we're doing, and we can really start out in a really good way. So we have since then began, even in our non-gifted classes, to start implementing these gifted motivational techniques. And we've seen higher levels of students, one, coming to class. We have a huge attendance issue at my school. They're coming to class. They're actually coming in and doing their work. And they're interested in asking questions and finding out a little bit more because they know what's coming. They know they're going to have to teach somebody, or they know they're going to have to debate the material. They know they're going to have to do something a little bit different. And it motivates them to actually understand the material on a different level rather than just regurgitating it. So these are the exact same results that I showed on my SDC. I assume everybody's probably looked at that since we have to rate each other. It talks about each individual class, their pre-implementation, the quiz, and then the unit test, quiz, unit test, so on and so forth. And then post-implementation, so at the end of the unit, after all of the motivational techniques were put in. And then the average, it's a 5-point rating scale. Again, if you're interested in what the survey looked like, it is on my SDC. And you can see the increase for everything. Some of it didn't increase a whole lot, so things like class 3 only went from a 76 to a 78 average on their quizzes, or class 1 only went from an 85 or an 81 to an 85. So some of the increases were small, but they were still there in every single class and in every measure that I had, which I wasn't expecting. I was not expecting this to do as much as it did. I was not expecting it. Now, I still have students who are complacent. I still have students that this didn't really do anything for them. But I had a lot of students overall that really clung to this, and it actually did a lot more than I was expecting it to. And then my references, and these are just the references from this. I obviously used a good number more for the actual project, but that's all. Thanks, guys.